Whoops. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of the TMI Show, the Ted Manila Information Show. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rall. And I am one tired mama, Ted, after...
No. What did you do?
Yeah.
You've been up partying?
Yes, partying with the conservatives at CPAC. No, really, that's what I'm tired about. As I don't know if you told the audience, I mean, I reminded the audience I was going to CPAC. I might go again if I can just drum up the energy to go.
So it was yesterday through Sunday. Is that the story?
Till Saturday night, 3 days. So the kickoff was yesterday. JD
Everyone
Vance,
goes home on Sunday, basically. They party Saturday night and then they go home. Okay.
Exactly. I don't go to those things. I never have. I've been to CPAC several times. This year was different. It was fraught with problems from the get-go just to get your media badges, which I got the night before on Wednesday. And JD Vance opened the...
Got to be careful with those Republicans. If you get your credentials wrong, they could send you to Guantanamo.
They might. I mean, they literally, yesterday, it was, man, just to get in. I mean, I live about 10 or 15 minutes away, door to door, from the event space. And once I got there, it took me over 45 minutes to get in because JD Vance was opening the ceremony. And he not only had Secret Service, obviously, but they brought in the entire TSA. I'm not kidding you. These were people like uniformed TSA agents.
Why?
With metal detectors you had to walk through. I mean, it was like I was going to the airport.
But isn't their purview just transportation facilities?
That's what I thought. So I was like, this is freaking weird. See how I didn't curse in the first 8 minutes?
That's good. Good for you. You have more self-discipline than I do.
But it's TV. It's the TV stuff. But so it was a mess getting in. One of the Secret Service guys was being a total a-hole to me, and at first didn't want to let me in because I had a bag with equipment in it. And then so I backed away and I said, okay, let me just watch if he's discriminating against me. Maybe he knows who I am. Maybe, who knows, right?
Well, what did he say? Did he say it had to be scanned or?
He literally, he literally said, ma'am, you can't come in with that big bag. And I was like, but I'm credentialed press and I'm wearing, and I was like, what? I don't understand the problem. I was like, what do you mean you can't? Like, people
ignore the ticking sound.
So I walk away and I wait.
That's just my Big Ben alarm clock, which I carry everywhere.
Yes. So I wait and I see a gaggle of women coming with big old giant purses that are not press. These are, people there for general admission. And I waited. And as soon as they walked past him, he flags them through. And I scurry back up and I go, he's like, no, ma'am, you can't come in with that bag. And I was like, okay, then why did I just watch you flag through 7 women with giant purses who are here for general admission? I am credentialed press. I said, I'd like to know why you're discriminating against me, preventing me from doing my job. I will gladly take this up to your CEO. Either you're discriminating against me because I'm media or because I'm Asian or because, I don't know what, but I will gladly take this up to your CEO. Do you want to explain to my camera? And he gave me the dirtiest look and he let me go through. So that was like a 40-minute hell just to get through.
Pushy.
You have to be pushy. I mean, pushy.
Gotta watch out for those Laotian ladies.
Those little angry Laotian ladies.
Partially Laotian.
So I finally get through, and then it's just a cluster F from start to finish, from picking up badges to the actual event, and it just, the vibe was different this year.
How so?
The attendance was down. From what I understand, talking to regular people that were there to attend, from some of the other media people from radio stations around the country, podcasters, TV networks, they believe the attendance was down this year because Trump won. And so many people flew in, people that would otherwise come to CPAC in February came last month for inaugurations. So, the viewership is more virtual this year, apparently, because people, blew their load in January to come for the inauguration, which I guess could make sense.
Yeah, especially for travel. I mean, it's only been a month. I mean,
Yeah, so I think
and and there are
yeah.
more appealing vacation destinations in midwinter than Washington
Yes,
D.C.
the
Particularly
dead of winter.
Particularly this year. It's a
Yes,
cold
it's
winter.
been, oh God, it's been a rough winter. So that's just the one day. But then I realized lugging my own equipment, not having a camera crew with me, my bones are not cut out for this anymore, Ted, when you're in your mid 40s. I can't carry around camera equipment like I did when I was like in my late 20s as a solo field reporter. Like you can just do all of that, right? Just like I used to in my mid 20s, like
Cameras be
traveling.
smaller than they used to be, but yeah.
I know, but even still, you have all this stuff. So let's say 30 pounds
I
in my
mean, come
bag.
on, you must feel when you look at like archival footage of like those guys in Vietnam,
Oh my
like
God.
lugging those fucking cameras around the jungle.
Yeah, that was so like just a myriad of things. And then the guest, the lineup yesterday, not great other than JD Vance. And then a big gap at the end until it was Javier Milei and Elon Musk, which I was not there for because they were there in the evening. And then I already spent 5 hours and I had to go, do mom stuff. But I will tell you the vibe, there's a big divide there between the MAGA movement, the real MAGA, versus the people who go to CPAC. The people who go to CPAC, I think, my impression is more of the standard bearers, whether you're speakers or whatever, more of the standard bearers of the GOP, more of the Christian right. And there's not a ton of overlap between them and the real MAGA populists, right? And I know Robbie's like at the office and can't really join, but he brought up a really, he can join. I'm gonna pop Robbie in there to kind of explain, producer Robbie. But for me, the people that are there, attendees and the guest list, were more of the Lindsey Grahams, the Mitt Romney types, the Mitch McConnells. They were very careful not to step on President Trump's toes. Especially because he has so clearly outlined all the aims of the first 100 days. And they, basically the overall trope yesterday was Trump is orange Jesus, Christianity amazing, we love Israel. And
well, Christianity is amazing.
Fair, fine. But the idea is, do we really need to end all wars? So that's not really, I would say, the MAGA message. And I did see a few MAGA bros, but they were few and far. Most other people were the people that would agree with Lindsey Graham, for example. And that's, I don't think
being closeted.
Oh, Ted. That, his philosophy and his idea of republicanism and conservatism, that's the majority of the people, I would say, who were there. Very buttoned down conservative types. Only a handful of what I would label like MAGA bros were there.
That's not surprising. None of that's surprising to me at all.
Well, I mean, you got to remember there's a big difference between a MAGA person and the Republican Party. Those are not the same. They're not synonymous. I mean, it's. Yeah. Look, I've said this before. I guess it is just the best way I kind of think about it. I have got more in common as a MAGA conservative, for lack of a better term,
right,
with a Ted Rall vision, who is a communist, than I do with a Lindsey Graham, or your milk toast standard Republican, because
that's Mitt Romney.
I mean, well, explain to me, how exactly is it America first to go and just start blasting the ever-living hell of a country on the other side of the planet, creating a refugee crisis? Then you have those refugees trying to come here. Let me
answer that question. So it depends, so when you say America first, right? You and I probably are pretty similar on what we think of America. And sure. We're thinking of Americans, and we're thinking about the vast majority of Americans who are not rich, don't own stock, don't have stock in defense contractors.
These are the people that went yesterday, by the way.
We are, yeah. I mean, most American people are middle class by definition, working class or poor by definition, probably 80 or 90%. And so, when you and I say America first, we think about things like, okay, let's make sure Americans have jobs and can afford things, et cetera, right? We're details to be. That's what and so before we start sending money overseas, for example, something that the left and the right, that parts of the right and the left agree on, parts of the left. But when they say America first of all, to them, it's just an advertising slogan. Okay.
Yes.
And secondly, if they're thinking about America, they're not thinking about the three of us or anybody listening here. They're thinking about
the system.
Well, they're thinking about the corporate system. They're thinking about their stock portfolio. They're thinking about exercising American power around the world in order to keep the military-industrial complex going. They're thinking, and if I want to give them credit, like where credit is due, in their minds, they might be thinking like America benefits by being a powerful military and an economic hegemon, and by pushing other countries around, that's what makes America great.
Which is why the sentiment was like, war. Is it really that bad?
Well, the question is what? That's right, exactly. They're imperialistic. They want it for them. It's about an empire. Now, to me, if I think about the ideal of an imperial model, I think about ancient Rome. Well, the whole point was that all of the wars, the wealth trickled back to the capital and benefited the average citizens. I mean, obviously, this was highly imperfect, and there were a lot of poor people in Rome. But that was the ideal, right? Is that like the system worked, right? We conquer foreigners, we bring the loot back home. Okay, but that's not how this imperial system works.
No. Where the Romans stepped on it is not so much when they start bringing the wealth back home, it's when they start bringing the slaves back home, and then that destroyed the entire social fabric of the Republic. And
but that took hundreds of years. And then, of course, they were no
that's
longer...
where we are now.
And also they used to reward the veterans, right, with farmland and everything.
Sure.
But anyway, that's without getting into ancient history.
That's not how we do it.
That's the thing. How can they say it's America first? Well, their America isn't the same as your America.
Correct.
So that's the answer to that question.
Well, I think that's just the thing, because I'm reading your book. I'm about, halfway through. And I think that your MAGA, your actual MAGA populist, I think without being able to actually label it, I think that they have touched on something, Ted, that you preach on, which is class consciousness. They just don't know how to say it. They understand that
is not any message I heard yesterday, by the way. Anything about class consciousness or the poor or
why would you?
None of that.
Because populism is about interesting, right? I mean, MAGA is a populist movement, right?
Correct.
And populism is I think my favorite populist is Huey Long. But populism is, depending on who you look at, it's a movement that motivates ordinary people, poor and working class. And you could say, if you're cynical, it's exploiting them and conning them. That's like a critique of Trump, that he's faking it. He's not the real thing. He doesn't care about ordinary people. We don't, but I don't believe in these kind of analyses because nobody can know what's in Donald Trump's heart. And really, who cares? It's about policy. It's about what gets done. But to me, so I just wrote a column that just came out. You can find it on my website, rall.com. But it's about the difference between a movement and a party. And I said part of the thing that the Democrats don't understand is they're a party and they just got defeated by a movement. And generally speaking, a movement will beat a party every time. A movement is, by definition, it moves. It's dynamic. Think about a Trump rally, right? Trump has all the flags, the excitement, the sense of camaraderie.
There was no excitement yesterday, by the way.
And okay, well, so that's because you're not that's not a movement, right? A movement rally is exciting by definition. Bernie led a movement, and he was trying to take over the Democratic Party. He failed and was expelled. Donald Trump succeeded. Now, normally a movement is centered around.
They sent Bernie to re-education camp.
They did, and it took unfortunately. But when you look at a movement, it's normally centered around an idea or a set of ideas.
Yeah.
So that idea could be anything. It could be, for example, we're the environmental movement. Okay, let's use that one, right? The environmental movement is all about the ecology. Well, if you're an environmentalist, you don't care if Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians or
Right.
socialists. You just care you'll work with whichever party cares about the environment as much as you
whichever
do.
one moves the ball.
And if things
towards your
change,
goal.
you'll change. You don't vote consistently with that party, right? That's a movement. And so normally they stay outside of party politics. A party is different. A party is generally loyal to a certain set of principles.
Like vote blue no matter who.
But if those principles change, the party is still the party. So if the Democratic Party was an anti-war party, and then they become a pro-war party, they're still the same people. It's still the same party. It's about an organization. And an organization
different. What's different this time?
And we'll make that the last word before we go into headlines.
The thing that's different is that for the last 10 years, maybe longer, the Democrats have won. Not only have they turned their backs on working class people, they have made it their message to say, we hate you. We don't like you. You're uneducated. You are inferior. And they said, we do not want you. We do not need you. Then you have Trump, who comes up as this giant middle finger and says, I hear you. And he ran as a Republican. And so that's where those people went. And I think what you're going to see is that the Republican Party, I think that the MAGA movement will outlive Trump because it's bigger than Trump. This idea of putting 330 million people, Americans first, you're going to see that if Trump actually governs that as he says he will.
We'll see, because that's not what it is now.
You will see that in the midterms.
Right now, MAGA is all about Trump. Like, what is this movement? It's not about a set of principles. If Donald Trump changes his ideas, he can't change them too much, but he can change his ideas a lot and still keep his movement. Right?
Well, there's some of that. Some.
The principle is to blow it up and start over.
But that's a tactic. That's a strategy. That's not
the goal.
That's not an ideology.
This is a whole other main topic that we should probably explore. Like just me witnessing this in real time.
Like what
at
exactly
CPAC.
is the MAGA movement? So what happened is, we have not seen in American politics, no populist movement has ever successfully taken over a political party before. It's never happened before.
I agree. And I'll tell you this from, I haven't been to CPAC in several years, but what I saw yesterday, even though there was branding of, Trump, 47, MAGA, there was branding there, but what I heard and the sentiment was not what I would define as MAGA. And of course, like Robbie pointed out, a lot of it is because the true MAGA movement type people, the people that believe in the philosophy or the idea of America first and reinvesting money here, and who cares about what's going on out there, let's work on here. Very few people were there, and those are the working class people, and they can't afford $200 tickets plus flights to DC plus expensive hotels plus getting time off. And a lot of those people, you're going to be it's cost prohibitive to go to this thing, right? To be at CPAC, you have to have some extra pocket change to make a big event out of this. And there were
and it's in Washington, where hotels are not cheap. Yeah,
that's what I said. The whole trip itself, your airlines, your hotels, like all of this is very expensive in the DC metro, and your food for the couple of nights that you're here, it's not cheap to make this a trip. So because of the cost, because it being cost prohibitive, you're not going to see the Robbie types there. And I think that's for a reason.
But why would they? MAGA is about the rallies. It's on the local level. Yeah. I mean, it's not about the, flying to the Capitol and hobnobbing with all the Hunger Games type people wearing shoes on their heads.
Yep. And I'll say this and I'll go away because I know we're going long and I'm here at work. MAGA transcends race. Now, Trump won a huge number of Latinos, blacks, Asians. It's not a racial
more than he ever had in the past.
It is a class. It's a class-based revolt, but they do not know how to articulate it. That's what this is.
And look, the left could get all of you guys, or most of you guys, if it was organized at all. Well, but it's not. There's no left in this country.
Well, Ted, the left says that they hate you. I mean, why would I ever join?
No, those are liberals. Those are liberals. The left. No, the left always puts the people first. The people are always right. In Marxism, it's like if you make a mistake, it's because you didn't listen to the people.
Gotcha. You're talking about your wing of
the left to me does not include the Democratic Party.
No, I agree.
That's why the tagline on my book is "Never mind the Democrats. Here's what's left."
Yep.
Right?
I'm going to go away now.
Well, fair enough. Okay.
Little Sex Pistols reference there.
All right, let's head over to headlines. We've gone long on that topic, but this is what I've witnessed, and I will probably bear witness to more of it tomorrow, because while it's not confirmed, Trump allegedly is going to close out the show.
Oh,
maybe.
All right. Well, that
it's
could
not
happen.
confirmed, and it's not on the website, but just from what I was hearing yesterday on the ground, so I may have to go for the final day and see if he does do the closing remarks and end this thing. And there's a lot of money involved, Ted. So I would imagine that he would, I don't know what it's applied to if he were to get more money from all the wealthy people that attend this stuff, but we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, he's rolling in money these days with his crypto and all that stuff.
Oh, totally. So's Melania.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, let's get to headlines.
It's almost the third anniversary of the Russian special military operation / invasion of Ukraine. The President Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg, went over to Kyiv on Thursday in order to discuss bringing the fighting to an end, as the Trump administration is shifting away from Ukraine and is seeing things more Russia's way. After the meeting between Kellogg and Zelensky, a scheduled joint press conference was canceled on the orders of the U.S. envoy, a sign that the two men had not seen eye to eye. Kellogg's visit came amid growing tensions between Trump and Zelensky. Trump recently called Zelensky a dictator this week, raising grave concerns about continued U.S. support for Ukraine. In fact, yesterday, there was a report from the Kyiv Independent that Trump has now cut off all arms shipments to Ukraine. We don't know if that's permanent or not, or if that's verified. Washington also opposed naming Russia as the quote-unquote aggressor in the G7's third anniversary statement. So there's no longer a united front against Russia. The thing is, I think it's notable, Manila, that Kellogg was an anti-Russia hawk, and he was the most pro-Ukraine member of the administration.
Absolutely.
And yet, he came out. But obviously, he was told by Trump, you can't be sucking up to the Z-Man as much as you usually do. So, and then that obviously did not fly with Zelensky. Right now, there's a lot of talk right now on social media, at least on my socials, among all my liberal Democratic friends, are like, how dare they call Trump's the dictator? Zelensky's not the dictator. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, Putin's the
Trump
dictator.
Trump is Putin?
And it's like, first of all, you guys need to understand what a dictator is and what an authoritarian is. You can't make any argument for any of them being a dictator. A dictator is a very specific thing. Saddam Hussein was a dictator. Hitler was a dictator. Right. A dictator is like one man rule that's like iron, and they don't have to worry about, say, a parliament or anything. That's not what's going on here.
I thought Hitler at one point was the actual chancellor, like he was elected.
Oh, he was. Yeah. Well, he was the And
then ascended to.
It was a parliamentary system, and the way it worked, as it does in many parliamentary systems still today, under the Weimar Republic, was that he got 37% of the vote because no party got a full majority. He had to form a government under President Hindenburg. President Hindenburg invited him to form a government, but he had to get at least 50% of the votes in the Reichstag. So he had to form alliances with some smaller parties. He formed alliances with the traditional conservative parties in Germany, sort of the Catholic parties, sort of the business corporate conservatives, and that's how he ascended to power. So, it wasn't really it's a parliamentary system. It's not a democracy.
Right. He didn't just roll in one day and said, I'm dictator chancellor of, right. He actually ascended power. And these articles all over the place that are trying to pose as semi-neutral on this subject, or at least pull back their rhetoric. They're like, how dare Donald Trump, call Zelensky a dictator? He's a beloved freedom defender of democracy and blah, blah, blah. And he was elected with 73% approval. Yeah, but that was in 2019. His term ended a year ago. He's not even held anything remotely close to even like polling on who should take over for him. He could have ceded power.
He was his polling numbers were in the toilet at the beginning of the war.
Right. Like I said, he might have been popular in 2019 when he came to power, but that's because he ran on the platform of making nice with Russia. And then he flipped like 4 months into it. He flipped. So of course,
he had sweet Victoria dwindle. Sitting on his lap, whispering sweet NATO nothings into his ear.
Ew! Oh, I'm just thinking, little Volodymyr Zelensky and not so little Victoria Nuland, just caressing up on him.
That's kinky.
Oh, ooh, no. That is not. No, I've got all kinds of yucky. Why is my brain doing this? Thinking of Victoria Nuland dressed in like lingerie. I hate my brain right now. Brain, stop it, please.
I was thinking about her using various implements upon his various parts.
Oh no. He has remember when he was an actor, he did the whole skit with his private parts playing piano. Very talented.
Oh, really? I mean, I can't even play piano. I can't even play piano the normal way.
Very talented man right there.
Maybe that's a fallback position for him if this $1 billion doesn't falls out of his bank account somehow.
Ted, can he do that shtick in the New York subway platforms? Do you think he'll earn any money as a busker?
I think so. Yeah. There's. I don't even think nudity is an issue because, we used to have in there when I was shocked when I moved into my dorm in 1981 here in New York, there was porn on community access cable. And I was like, how can you have porn on community access cable? Well, it turns out that someone sued against this. It was called Channel J for people who don't remember. The most infamous ad that they ran, all these party line ads was 970p. The extra E is for extra P. Anyway, the point is, anyway, the case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court, and you can look this up, declined to rule against the cable company because they said New York City does not have community standards. And I was like, that's actually true. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He could be a penis piano playing busker in New York City. There you go.
A peanut busker. Career. All right. Gross. Well, okay. Excellent. I had not heard of that. All right. Russia has retaken more than 300 square miles of territory in Kursk. That's in Russia itself, since Ukraine carried out a cross-border offensive into that border region last summer, according to the Russian top general. Speaking to Krasnaya Zvezda newspaper, Colonel General Sergei Rudskoy said February 20th that the retaken territory is 64% of all the land that the Ukrainians originally captured. In August, the Ukrainians launched a surprise cross-border raid into Kursk, which shares a lengthy border with the northeastern Sumy region of Ukraine. The Ukrainians initially captured several hundred square miles of Kursk territory, the Kursk Oblast, which Kyiv had hoped to use as a bargaining chip. Despite fierce counterattacks, the Ukrainians still continue to hold a significant but steadily dwindling swath of Russian territory near the border. Putin, on February 19th, said that Russian troops operating in Kursk had decided to enter Ukraine's Sumy region in force. Overnight, he said, fighters of the 8th 10th Brigade crossed the border of the Russian Federation and Ukraine and entered enemy territory. Speaking to reporters in St. Petersburg, Putin continued that Russian forces were now advancing along the entire line of contact. And as we've had our friend of the show, Mark Sloboda, an analyst about the war, has mentioned to us, this is the Russians haven't really, I mean, obviously they want the Ukrainians out of Russia, but this is a pretty low population area. It hasn't been enough. I think the Ukrainians were kind of hoping that the Russians would withdraw some troops from Ukraine in order to deal with this, but they really haven't, for the most part, had to do that. They just figured we'll just continue what we're doing in Ukraine, and we'll send some supplemental forces to Kursk and just drive the Ukis out on our own schedule. And it's interesting because the war has been carried out really on Russia's schedule. Somehow the Western press wants everything to be quick, and it just doesn't work that way. Yeah,
no surprise, but I don't know why the Western media is not reporting more about how, because remember when the Ukrainians first went into Kursk, they were like, oh, this is it. They're really fighting back. They're going to take over Russia and
struck me as an act of desperation.
Drive into Moscow and pull Vladimir Putin out by his toes. They're going to do it. And I was just like, you guys,
this is why cannabis has been legal in D.C. for a long time, and this is a problem.
Like, what are you guys snorting? Like, they took, and like, the realistic thing is the town of Kursk, or the oblast of Kursk, is a low population. Not to say those people don't matter, those civilians, but this, I agree with you, was an act of desperation to show that, see, we really are a real fighting force. So our Western backers, you should fund us more, because they knew the writing was on the wall even back then, that they were starting to lose Western support, at least in the way of sentiment. So they needed to show something, right? To be like, look, we made an incursion into Russia. Like, look how strong we are. Meanwhile, their population is dwindling. Sadly, they're lowering the age of conscription. Just all of this. I agree that it was an act of desperation, but for me, this was them, a show of force to be like, Western backers, look how mighty and powerful. We're small but mighty. Give us more. And help us. We're driving into Moscow. I think that was the idea they were trying to project.
Well, it's what they hoped. Yeah, I mean, for sure. They hoped for that.
Give me a break. Like that. Yeah, that they thought they were going to push some line, this straight line past St. Petersburg into Moscow. Come on. Give me a break. That was so unrealistic.
The Justice Department has launched an investigation into United Health Group's Medicare billing practices. The new civil fraud investigation examines United's practices for recording diagnoses that trigger extra payments to its Medicare Advantage plans, including at physician groups that the insurance company owns. A series of articles in the Wall Street Journal last year showed that Medicare paid United Health billions of dollars for questionable diagnoses. Attorneys with the DOJ interviewed medical providers named in the articles. In the Medicare Advantage system, an insurance company gets a lump sum payment from the federal government to oversee enrollees' Medicare benefits. When patients have certain diagnoses, the payments go up, creating an incentive to diagnose more diseases. Shares in United Health have dropped more than 10% in pre-market trading before today's session opened at 9:30 this morning Eastern Time. The Medicare billing investigation adds scrutiny to United Health, the $400 billion company that owns the largest health insurer and a sprawling network of other health industry assets, including doctor practices, a large pharmacy benefit manager, and data and technology operations. This civil investigation is separate from a long-running DOJ antitrust probe that the Journal reported on last February. The DOJ has also sued to block United's $3.3 billion planned acquisition of Amedisys, which is a home health care company, for violations of antitrust laws. By the way, full disclosure, I just wrote a letter to Luigi.
You did?
I did. I wrote a letter to Luigi.
He says
he reads them all.
He says that he reads them all. Every single one.
I asked, I do those little graphic novel biographies of Edward Snowden, Pope Francis, Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders. Anyway, so I want to do one about Luigi, if he'll let me.
Wow.
So, yeah. I mean, honestly, no one, this is true. No one would ever be as fair to him as I would.
I agree.
I mean, agree. Everyone else will just fuck him.
Oh, and speaking of Luigi, he's supposed to appear in court for the first time today.
Yeah. So, and he's raised almost last check over $400,000 for his legal defense fund. Mm-hmm. So he's a cause célèbre. He's like the the new lefty cause. Leonard Peltier is out.
Yeah.
So
he's
the new Mumia.
Ha!
Hopefully we'll have more success getting him out than we've had with
when
Mumia.
I was in college. That was the whole thing. I remember seeing T-shirts, on other college students, free Mumia. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is today. Luigi's the new Mumia. But yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, just looking at the numbers from, for example, like this CNBC report about how big United Health actually is, that it is actually bigger than the biggest bank in the United States.
Okay, that's insane.
That's fucking nuts. This is coming from CNBC. I mean,
this is a business that shouldn't even be a business. It should make less money than my local pizza parlor. It shouldn't even exist. It adds zero value. It extracts wealth. It is a giant sucking sound from the wallets of the American people.
They're bigger
and the doctors
than either Chase Bank or B of A. Like that's
at least Chase Bank and B of A provide services. I mean, they keep your money safe. They lend money to people who need to buy stuff. It's like they facilitate transactions. You tell me, what does United Health and companies like it, what do they do for us? Nothing.
Look at this this is the name of the CNBC little mini special that they did. How United Health grew larger than the biggest U.S. bank.
It's insane.
So that's
by basically turning down claims.
Yeah, I mean, just by screwing people over. So I mean,
it's really simple. It's very simple.
Wow.
You charge people for a service and then you don't provide it. That it's a good profit model. Yeah.
That's true. All right, let's move on.
Okay, Delta said that it is offering $30,000 to every passenger who was aboard that flight that flipped over in Toronto on its way from Minneapolis. All 80 people survived, 76 passengers and 4 crew. Delta flight 4819, after it, we've seen the video now, it hit the ground, the right wing sheared off, and then the thing flipped over and rolled at Toronto Pearson International Airport on Monday. Of the 21 people who went to the hospital, all but one have now been released. None of the passengers had life-threatening injuries. Delta confirmed that it made the $30,000 offer to passengers. Its reps were telling the passengers that the offer comes with no strings attached and does not affect rights. In other words, your right to sue. 3 days after the crash, officials haven't released very many details about the investigation. On Wednesdays, Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, told CBS that the flight had been staffed by an experienced crew, but there was little additional information. Passengers, however, are already probably looking to sue. Roshan Genova, a Canadian law firm, says it's already been retained by some of the passengers. According to international treaties, when an aviation accident causes injury or death, and this is an international flight, although if Donald Trump has his way, it will not be an international flight in the future, airlines in the U.S. are required to make advance payments to passengers if the airline determines that the money is necessary to cover their immediate economic needs. If a passenger dies, the initial payment must be over more than about $20,000, according to the Delta website, which cites the Warsaw and Montreal conventions. If the passenger is injured, then the payment is determined by the airline. So by those standards, this is a pretty generous payout. I guess they're probably kind of figuring that a lot of people might decide not to sue. $30,000 is a lot of money. I'm shaken, but I'm okay.
Not stirred.
I'm not stirred. So I'll be fine, and I'll just I'll just
and not go through the trouble as you and I both know, Ted, in lawsuits. It is a lot of other mental anguish and stuff that actually probably ties into our main topic.
Yeah, I was planning to mention that, so we can get into that. And finally, if art is measured by the passion that it inspires in its admirers or the extent of its reach, Birkenstocks, touted by hipsters and healthcare workers alike and sported by the likes of Steve Jobs and Barbie, might count as a masterpiece. But Germany's top court begs to differ, ruling yesterday that the cork shoes and sandals are no work of applied art at all. In a legal drama that's been unfolding over the last 2 years, Birkenstock argued that several models are applied art, a designation given to creators defined by functionality in daily life as well as aesthetic merits. The company said imitations would violate the copyright its footwear would be entitled to under the designation, as it tries to keep some knockoffs, often called Fakenstocks, off the market shelves. For such legal protection, however, a level of design has to be achieved that reflects individuality, according to the court. The court concluded that creativity has not been demonstrated to such an artistic extent that those models are entitled to German copyright protection. Birkenstock, in a statement, called the ruling a missed opportunity for copyright protection in Germany, and said it'll continue to take tough action against copycats who think they can make money from other people's creative ideas and inventions. Birkenstock's history, and I did not know this, in Germany goes back to the 1700s, according to the company's website. The footwear was introduced to the U.S. in 1966, mainly in West Coast health food stores by the designer Margot Fraser, who bought them because she had sore feet while she was visiting Germany. I did not know that this company was so storied, or that I didn't even know it was German. Of course, when you think about it, Birkenstock, but I just didn't it just didn't occur to me.
Carl Birkenstock, there it is on the screen.
And no, it's super. I will say that they're ugly as sin.
Yes.
And I don't find them comfortable at all, but I have I have trouble with sandals. They rub up against that space between my big toe and the second toe, and I always get a blister there. So,
but that's the stuff the sandals that go in between your toes.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. But then also, the rear.
I don't like those.
I always get heel blisters, and so heel blisters are a problem. I don't know. They give me blisters. I'm like, I know people like them.
I'm not a big fan, but
no, I don't.
But is it art? Is the question? Can
applied art?
Can applied art, but art nonetheless? Is it? I will argue that obviously they were a cultural phenomenon, right? Like it is a thing.
Yeah.
I remember one of my college professors. Of course, he's an English professor. Old hippie, right? Shout out to Mark McQueen. I wonder if he's still alive. But he admittedly was an old school hippie, and he used to wear Birkenstocks every day to school as he taught us, and he's, in front of the class, but he would wear them with socks. And I remember thinking, God, those are just sinfully ugly. Just God, like, no.
They're ugly. Yeah, they're not as ugly as Uggs.
I was going to say, but here's me, the college student, wearing Uggs with my shorts, right? This is like the year 2000, right? So there's me wearing horrible shoes too, and there's him and his generation wearing horrible shoes. But the argument is both of them are really, really comfortable. And so I get it. And I like big, loose, roomy shoes. I don't like, I'm not, as you can see, I'm not, in my real life off TV, I'm not a dressy person. I just want to wear like sweatpants and flip-flops. Like that's me. But the Birkenstock, is it art? Your design, is it applied art? The argument would be, is whoever invented the stiletto pump, could whoever invented that, their company, argue that was applied art? It became a cultural phenomenon.
I would certainly think so. Look,
who gets
art
to
is
say?
Inherently subjective, right? So,
right.
I remember applying as a young struggling cartoonist. I applied for an NEA grant and National Endowment for the NEH. Right? What was it called? The National Endowment for the Arts. That's what it was. Grant. And I was rejected, not on the grounds that I wasn't any good, which may well be true, and probably a lot of people do believe
At least
that.
you didn't turn
Mostly
into Hitler.
me, but a lot of people. But they said I was turned down on the grounds that cartooning. I still have the letter. Cartooning is not an art form. Now, okay, I mean, look, it's like I said, it's subjective. In my view, it's clearly an art form. But, what is an art form? What is art? What's applied art?
Drawing is art, no?
Yeah, I mean, what about architecture? Is that an applied art? I mean, I would say,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and so is shoe design applied art? I mean, clearly, shoe design is applied art.
I mean, if you copycat, like, say, a famous Eichler home, are you then stealing Eichler's architecture?
I would say you are. Yeah, 100%. Of course you are.
So I don't know. This is a tough one for me because I find them hideous, but they really are comfortable.
Well, something that's ugly doesn't mean that it's not art. I mean, brutalist architecture is ugly, and it is art. I mean, it's architecture. It is art, right?
And also, as a consumer, they are
go to the Whitney Biennial if you think art has to be pretty. It does not.
Well, I agree. Not only are they sinfully ugly, but they are very expensive. But
all right. Well, to me, the fact of it being expensive in a German court might be
good quality,
an advantage it might support the claim of it being an applied art more than it being cheap. Although I don't really think it should make any difference. But
last comment I have is when in my early days when I was trying to pay for college and I was slanging used cars and new cars, but I had a customer come back to me. And at that point I worked for Toyota, and I was like 18, 19 years old and old Asian man. And we worked in this, I don't know if they still call it that, but called the Cerritos Auto Square, where it's just literally just row after row after row of every car make and manufacturer you could think of. So it made it really difficult because if your customer is not going to buy Toyota, he might go across the street to Honda or to Hyundai, right? Or Kia, that was new back then. But so here he is with me. I'm trying to sell him a Toyota Corolla, and he's like, oh no, he pushed back, the price is too expensive. I'm gonna go to, I think he said Kia or Hyundai, I can't remember. But so he goes over there. A couple days later, he comes back. Manila. Okay, I want to look at that Corolla again. And I said, well, what made you come back? I thought you said these are too overpriced. And then he said, oh, I see now. Good thing, not cheap. Cheap thing, not good. And that stuck with me forever, to understand the value of why you're paying more for something, because good thing, not cheap. Cheap thing, not good.
There are exceptions, but generally that's true.
Generally, that's true. Generally. So there's that. All right. So that's our last headline, because I thought that was a fun Friday topic. Like, I don't know. Do you guys like Birkenstocks? I'm curious how many of our viewers and listeners own a pair of Birkenstocks.
There are people who really like this. They like the arch support. People who have like collapsed arches tend to like them. And my podiatrist recommended that.
John Adam Birkenstock, 1774. How about that?
Wow, it's crazy.
How about that?
Yeah.
I never knew.
Goes all the way back.
Is that a German name though? John Adam
Birkenstock.
Oh, Johann
Adam Birkenstock.
That makes sense. Johann Adam Birkenstock, 1774. So
that's cool. That's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I might want one just for historic purposes. One pair.
No, I mean, I still have a pair somewhere. From
I don't know where mine are.
Living on the West Coast, but
yeah, exactly. It's required footwear.
Yes, as soon as you get off the plane at SFO, they're handed to you.
It is true. Yeah. This is a thing. Go look it up. Gavin,
it's like black clothing in New York. It's required.
Birkenstocks are required wear in California. Required footwear. Mm-hmm. All right, let's change topics. Jaws it.
Manila, I have been very much looking forward to today's topic. Okay, so moral injury is the deep distress that can emerge when you feel that your values have been violated. And I'm going to linger on this, either by yourself or by someone else. So whether you betray your values yourself, which we all do from time to time, or whether we do so because we feel coerced, perhaps by a romantic partner, by a boss, whatever. The resulting feelings of powerlessness, guilt, and shame can lead to mental health problems like anxiety, depression, and even suicide. Egregious betrayals can create psychological distress, but so can relatively small everyday events, according to Dr. Connor Arquette, a plastic surgery resident at Stanford who has researched moral injury. Let's just say that you value fairness, Dr. Arquette says, but your team at a hospital has been told to go above and beyond for a rich patient. If other patients aren't getting the same level of attention, you might feel like your morals are being compromised, he added. Moral distress, which is a precursor to the term moral injury, was first coined in the mid-'80s in reference to nurses who felt that they were being obstructed by their bosses from doing what was morally right while on the job. Later in the 90s, the psychiatrist Jonathan Shea coined the term moral injury to refer to veterans from the military who were psychologically harmed by carrying out their commanding officers' orders that violated their beliefs, for example, to kill or harm civilians. The term has been applied to other groups as well. Teachers, healthcare workers, government officials, and public safety professionals may encounter mandates that threaten to compromise their values, witness morally repugnant behavior, or become a victim of someone else's transgression. In the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of research on moral injury, according to Dr. Harold Koenig, Dr. Wortham's mentor and a psychiatrist at Duke, who with his team created scales to measure these emotional wounds. Where's this all going? Well, it's going pretty high. Dr. Wortham and her colleagues have now, they did propose modifying the American Psychiatric Association's DSM-5. This is the Bible of American psychiatry. It's the classification of mental health conditions to include the notion that moral problems could contribute to a mental health condition. In December, after more than a year of review, the APA agreed. The change will now appear this coming September in the DSM-5. So what can you do about it? Well, there's not a quick fix, but taking action can be important toward healing. And one thing you could maybe do in certain circumstances is speak up and ask for change. Of course, if you were betraying your own values, speaking up to yourself may not do that much good. There are situations where your hands are tied. At work, for example, if your boss is telling you to do something that goes against your moral code, that make you question whether this is the right environment for you. Maybe quit your job if you can. When faced with moral injury, experts say that building moral resilience is crucial. Dr. Thomas does this with a daily ritual. Every time she washes her hands, she thinks about the challenges that others may be facing. Then she finds a way to make a simple gesture like checking in with a colleague who's having a stressful day. Gay. these small acts of compassion help bolster one of her core values, integrity. Okay, let's forget that stupid hand washing thing. But look, I don't think it's possible to be a human being or to have worked without having experienced like a boss telling you to do something that you don't think is right. Like, and I can think of an example. I had a boss who really was my favorite boss at the Japanese bank where I used to work at. But every now and then he decided to fuck over one of our customers. And rather than, basically by breaking like an agreement that we had, like, oh, we said we're going to make you a loan, we're not going to make you a loan, whatever. And so instead of like owning that decision, he'd be like, hey, Mr. Ted, you call client and tell that no loan.
He's Japanese, by the way, folks.
He's Japanese, and then I'm sure he still is. And I was like, why don't you call him? Like, you're the one who's fucking him over. Why do I have to? It's like,
because you're the underling. You have to do the dirty work.
You are dog. You call. He didn't say that, but that was the implication. And and it really pissed me off. And it's like it's one thing to do things that are wrong, which of course I've done, but like at least I own that myself. But to like
I had that.
But to be told to do something that you know is wrong. I do think of, like, for example, like a cop or a soldier who's in the chain of command and is told, like, you have to do this, even though you personally know it's wrong. That's got to suck. And you can get all sorts of cognitive dissonance going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, this is now an officially
there was a lot of that, by the way, at CPAC.
This is an officially diagnosable psychiatric condition that you will be able to make, potentially have covered by insurance companies. I mean, the inclusion of this in the DSM-5 is huge. It makes it official. It makes it a real thing, right? So
that's true. That is needed, so that way United cannot pay out your
that's right.
psychology bill when when the shrink sends it over.
But you can make the claim.
Yes.
You just can't get it paid.
Ultimately, I never really thought about moral injury.
United Health is an example of that. People work there and they know that they're turning down claims that they shouldn't be turning down. And some of them have said it's very upsetting for them to work in a place that forces them to do things that are wrong. Oh, I used to have a job as a telemarketer, and I had to call, like, people to sell them, like, garbage. And it was all, like, the only people who ever bought the garbage were, like, vulnerable, sad old ladies who were who were lonely and just trying to, make me feel good. I hated that job because it wasn't just boring, but that aspect of it just was horrific.
Yeah. I have not yet heard any of the United Health former or current workers, like, say anything publicly yet, but I bet they have to have some sort of this moral injury, but not yet moral outrage over what they're doing if they're still employed. I've not yet heard that, but I've lived through that. This is why I got out of the car business. So I'm actually glad I mentioned that in the last segment. Was eventually, I moved my way up in the car industry, in the car business, right, from floor, selling cars on the floor, right, to becoming a special finance manager, where I had some expertise in, what the banks buy and what they'll fund and what, and how to move the numbers around. So many years in, I became what was called a special finance manager. And this is one of the times I took a long pause in my college education, and I was making money hand over fist, but I was starting to get the onset of an ulcer at 23, because I think deep down inside, I was ultimately in moral distress over what I was doing, because in special finance, I was working with clients that were anything from, let's say, a street pharmacist to strippers to, people that don't necessarily
what's a street pharmacist? You mean a drug dealer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So people that don't, are ghosts on credit, right? Because they live day to day on cash. So that was my area of expertise on how to, teach them how to get something on paper so you can buy this $80,000 Denali. Especially.
So what was okay? I'm sorry, I'm not getting it. What was your moral qualm?
Besides those people that I had no problem, those weren't the qualms. Like if you're a drug dealer,
I wouldn't care.
I don't have a qualm about. I don't have a qualm about
drug dealers. Drug dealers have to drive too, right? I mean,
right. I have no problem with them getting a 21% loan, right?
Sure.
But then I had a large swath of customers who were blue collar, working class people. Let's say, the cashier at the local grocery store, bad credit, just low income, bad credit, and whatever, perhaps no credit even. And I get to select not only the car that will qualify for your credit profile, but I got to dictate the terms of your loan in its entirety, right? Like, because I have the power to contact my contacts at different lending institutions and negotiate the terms of your contract. I have the power to do all that. And I know that if the bank, my guy at ABC Bank, is going to give you the loan at 15%, I'm going to tell you, the cashier, working at the local grocery store. Yeah, your credit is so shitty. I can only get it for you at 21% if you really need this car. And I get to I get to keep that 6% back end, right? And for every point,
that's nasty.
That's nasty. So for every point,
but did you have the choice not to do that?
Of course I did, because
could you have said like, your rate's 15%?
Of course I could have told her, you got approved at 15%. We're going to charge you 16. But instead, I would hit the California maximum allowable at 21%. I was making money hand over fist because.
So this wasn't you being told to do. You were just doing it.
No, it was encouraged. Because then I make more money, the store makes more money, and everybody, on the sales side of it is happy. And I was making a shit ton of money, and I was thinking, like, I don't need to go back to finish college. Look how much money I'm freaking making. And this is, like early 2000s, where $80,000 to, in the early 2000s is a lot of freaking money, right? That's a lot of money.
That's true.
And at that time, I didn't have a college degree, and I was thinking, why?
And this was in LA, right?
Yeah.
And LA was a much cheaper place to live than, say, the East Coast. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, I was incentivized to do that. And eventually I found myself slipping away at lunch and starting to have a cocktail with my lunch, because I couldn't understand what it was, because
you felt guilty.
Right. And I didn't know that at the time. And I was suddenly not able to sleep. I was just not. And it is this moral injury, because my core value is not to screw people over. And that's what I was doing for a living.
Right. No, I mean,
so look, I could live.
That's a great example. I don't know that I've, the telemarketing thing, I didn't last long. I didn't last long enough to really feel guilty about it. And I didn't really line my pockets. I mean, I was just, I was making basically just above minimum wage. It was like, God, I don't remember how much I made. I think it was like $10 an hour or something. I mean, it was like, so it's not like I didn't really I felt badly for the old ladies. And I didn't like that, but I wasn't really getting rich. I mean, moral injury can also be when you're the victim of an immoral act. We're kind of like maybe seeing that a little bit like right now in Washington with some of the Doge people who are being fired by Doge, who are falsely being told that it's because of their poor performance, instead of just like, well, the government's just cutting people back, which they're being told, like, there are people who are being sent form letters saying, oh, your performance sucks, that's why you're being let go. It's bad enough to be fired. It's another to be lied to. Most of these people haven't even had performance reviews. So there's like no way to say that, like, they're just basically just being told bullshit. That's a moral injury. I always think about like what the LA Times did to me. I still can't get over it. I was
all these years later.
Oh God. I mean, yeah, it was 2015. I still remember where I was. I get a call from, Goldberg at the LA Times, my editorial page editor. And he's like, he calls up and he's like, oh, Ted, I got to ask you about something. You wrote about this blog like a while ago, and LAPD is questioning your account of this incident that happened 14 years ago, and they're saying that you lied. And I'm like, well, of course they're saying that I lied. It's the LAPD. That's what they do. They lie for a living. Anyway, they have, I don't know what's going on. Long story short, that triggered this series of events that was absolutely insane. And ultimately, when everything came to light, the fact that it came to light that the publisher of the LA Times, Austin Butner at the time, who later became the superintendent of all LA schools, had a secret meeting with Charlie Beck, who was the chief of police of the LAPD, over little old Ted Rall and his pictures about Charlie Beck, and was like, not only do I want you to fire Ted Rall, I want you to destroy him so he can never work again. And when Buettner told Beck, well, we don't have anything on him. He didn't do anything wrong. It's like, Beck was like, I don't care. Do it anyway. And like, it's kind of just when it all came out, it was like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's just like, I was like, it made me question like everything about the world. Because I mean, to me, the LA Times was like one of the best newspapers in the country.
Right. I used to dream of working there.
Me too. I dreamed of working there. I thought it was the best full service newspaper in America. By full service, I mean, like the New York Times is not a full service newspaper. It doesn't have like advice columns. It doesn't have, it doesn't have comics, all the horoscopes, all the stuff that a newspaper ought to have. The Wall Street Journal is not a full service newspaper. They're both great papers, but the LA Times had it all, including great international coverage and national coverage.
Yeah.
And it was like to find out that like these people who were in charge of, this incredibly illustrious journalistic institution were corrupt as shit and had sold themselves out literally. They literally sold the parent company's stock to the LAPD pension fund.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. It just blew my brains apart. To this day, I'm still in therapy over it. 9 years later, 10 years later. So
that's a similar thing is why I left the mainstream media in 2014 to go work for RT, right? It was because I was doing a series special on, at the time, as I just mentioned, I was a special finance manager at a General Motors dealership. And when the ignition switch issue popped up in like 2012, 2013, I was working in local news, and I wanted to do because I had inside knowledge to all of this, right? Like I had personal firsthand knowledge and how stuff like this can happen, right? Because at that point, GM, because back in my day, I was making so much money hand over fist, and I was identified as like an up and coming, young professional in that industry at a top GM dealership. I was identified by Detroit as somebody that they might want to groom to become a dealership owner, because not only was I young, I was young, I was aggressive, I was smart, whatever, but I was female and a minority. And at the time, GM was already, this is, all the woke stuff. This is how it started. It began a long time ago. People think it was like 10 years ago. But
sure.
It's slow. Yeah. It's been slow coming. GM was like, we need to identify people that aren't straight white cis males to own more of our dealerships. And I was identified as one of them. And so fast forward 10 years after that, where I'm now an anchor at the local CBS in Arizona. And I was doing a story about the ignition switch problems. And that story got killed by the executives at CBS. And I got a cease and desist letter because after my first or second of the series aired, first the local dealerships were pissed that I did that, and they were threatening to pull ads. And then word got to national in New York, and I got the cease and desist.
Wow.
And now this is me as a reporter, being the thing that I always wanted to be, even though I stopped my career track, because I was making money in working as a special finance manager in the automotive industry. I always wanted to be a reporter. That's just what I've always wanted to do. So here's me doing that, reporting on the industry I used to work on. And then here's the industry that I thought I loved telling me to shut the fuck up because of money. And so I had to shut up. I had no choice, right?
Right.
And that is what precipitated me looking elsewhere to leave and to go into what was, what we now know as alt media, going to work for RT. That's how it happened. It was because now I felt so violated as in my core principles of me going back to school, sucking it up, spending all the money I made on education and moving back home, boomerang kidding it. To finish school. Now here is that exact industry telling me you can't do this because you are interrupting our cash cow. General Motors is a cash cow.
Yeah, and that right there is what corruption looks like, right? So LA Times again, right? So I sued them. And I had an incredibly hard time, for example, finding a lawyer. So, and I learned all the stuff about the way the system works.
Well, to fight the LAPD,
institutional corruption is, right? So first, lawyers hear about this and they're like, oh my God, like deep-pocketed defendant, like one hell of a defamation claim. I'm going to get rich. They love it, right? And then one of two things happens. First of all, the LA Times, like all major companies, they all do this. There's a rule that like if there's a big law firm with 1,000 lawyers, if one lawyer is retained or works for one party one party in a lawsuit, the whole firm cannot represent the other side of that because it's a conflict of interest, right? Okay. So what companies
even like as previous client?
So even if the LA Times, so the LA Times, and they did this, they literally retained one attorney at every law firm in Los Angeles. So you can't get an attorney. Okay. Wow. Or you can't get an attorney who works for a big enough firm to take on a big outfit like the LA Times, right? So getting an attorney is really hard. Then there's like rallying support. So I got amicus briefs from every First Amendment organization in the United States, except for the ACLU, the most famous one. Why? Well, they hemmed and they hawed and they were like, yeah, you got fucked over and it's totally not fair. And we know we're sympathetic. But in the end, when they finally told me the truth, the reason that they couldn't do it was because they had signed an agreement with, wait for it, the LA Times for the Southern California ACLU to release all of their reports exclusively through the LA Times. So they didn't want to blow their relationship with the LA Times by issuing a statement in my defense. It was just like one thing after another like that, where you just like, they had their tentacles in everything. And in the end, the way that's one of the final things that happened to me, it was right during the pandemic. We were told that this went all the way to the California Supreme Court. Big deal. The California Supreme Court decides to rule. They rule unanimously in my favor, right? And in the opinion that comes down, the California Supreme Court in San Francisco rules. They say this appears to be one of the most egregious and extreme examples of political corruption in the history of the state of California. Now, that's saying a lot because California's had a lot of corruption. And so we're like, yeah, they're fucked. We've won. And then it's like, then we get a call from the courts. We're closing down for COVID. All the courts are shutting down, right? We'll be back. We'll get back to you in a few months to schedule another hearing. We get then April Fool's Day of 2020 during the lockdown. We get a total reversal. The court has ruled 0 to 5 against you. It's called, and it's a type of ruling where they don't issue any ruling at all. They don't explain themselves. And they say it's an uncertified ruling, which under California law means like Bush v. Gore, it can't be cited as precedent because they're acknowledging that it's political. They're only doing it for political reasons and it violates California law. But they're making the statement, they're making the ruling anyway, but you can't use it as a precedent in the future because it's shitty law. So there's basically like, we're fucking you, but it's basically
and they
like,
admit that it's shitty law.
We're fucking Ted Rall, personally. It's personal.
Period.
Yeah, that's it. It's not about, we're not interpreting the law. We're reversing ourselves completely without comment after issuing like a 45-page, decision in my favor.
Well, no wonder you're scarred.
So, and it's like, that's just like that's like the bullet points. I mean, this thing went on for years and it was like one thing after another like that. And it grinds you down. And, then, you walk by like those big buildings and, you walk by the big courthouse with their Corinthian columns and, I remember arguing in court in front of the LA Times lawyer, and she literally in court says, the truth doesn't matter. And I remember saying, I was like,
True.
it literally says truth and justice under the law in stone in front of the courthouse. But apparently it doesn't matter. She was right. It's these kind of things, and it happens to everybody, and it can even be little things. One time I was driving a cab in New York in the 80s, and this traffic cop is standing I'm in the right lane going up the avenue, and the traffic cop's standing right in front of me, and she goes, turn right. So I turn right, and she issues me a ticket for making an illegal right-hand turn. She just had a quota. I mean, that kind of thing. And I challenged the ticket, and I lost.
Well,
and everybody has had experiences like this.
Yes, everybody. I mean, every single person, if you live long enough, it'll happen to you multiple times. Like for me, in my mid 40s, I've already experienced it twice now, career-wise, right? That's twice in my professional life that I've been angry. Maybe 3 if you count that I'm presently, and probably this applies to you too, Ted. I'm angry now at the entire media apparatus in America, that not only are people like you and I 86'd because
Completely.
of who we worked for, not only, that part is angering enough, but just to watch the industry that I dreamt of going into as a child, when I would watch, seeing Connie Chung and Ted Koppel on TV, that I want to grow up and be like that, right?
Yeah.
The industry I admired as a kid, the Vietnam War, images I've seen, the documentaries, the
All
reporters,
President's Men.
I wanted to do that. And then here I am in that industry, literally elbow to elbow with these people, as I was yesterday, right? Like with the mainstream. And I felt nothing but contempt.
Yeah,
Ted. I felt
literally
pure rage and contempt.
It's completely it's totally twisted, right? It's Wally World. It's insane.
I'm the bad guy.
Yeah, like literally. So they're all corrupt as hell. They're all told like,
but I'm the bad guy.
And you and I both know, RT and Sputnik never said like, you can't criticize Russia, you can't criticize Putin, blah 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 blah. They never did anything like that. Those guys, they get those orders all the time.
Yes. Absolutely.
Analogous orders.
So I currently still, I think, I don't know if this is a third moral injury turned outrage for me. I think I'm at the outrage part. But to make some light of that last bullet point in the article that you read, where Dr. Thomas does this daily ritual, like
washes her hands.
Gay. And she makes a simple look, I feel to some degree, though, like, am I going to go seek mental health evaluations or see a shrink because I'm pissed off at the mainstream media, my colleagues in the media, for how they have bastardized this storied industry, right? The fourth estate. I should be fucking furious, and I should be, am I so angry that I need to go see a shrink about it? Honestly, no.
And I do.
I'm not. I'm like, not for me. I'm kind of like, fuck you. You guys suck. Like you will get yours one day, because you're all being exposed as being fakes and phonies. How you live with yourself, I don't know. I imagine many of these people, or maybe not, maybe they've all really drank the Kool-Aid, and I don't know, maybe not.
Most people don't care. And I think that's the thing. You have to have a conscience in order to have moral injury.
I was 23 years old and developing an ulcer. And mind you, I was already a yogi, like a California crunchy yogi at that point, right? In my early 20s, developing an ulcer. Why would I have been developing an ulcer in my early 20s other than it was the guilt eating away at me from the car industry? So fast forward to now, how do all these mainstream media people live with themselves unless they actually did drink the Kool-Aid, and they believe what they're saying, and they're smelling their own farts amongst each other and saying, oh, that smells like roses, it's lovely, and they're fine with it. But I'm out here.
They believe their own shit. I'm telling you, like, for example, the guy I mentioned, Jeffrey Goldberg, so corrupt, still at the LA Times, by the way.
Wow.
And he even published a book with the new LA Times tagline. Everybody knows, what is it? Democracy dies in darkness, Washington Post.
Yeah,
that's Washington. LA Times, wait for it. Speaking truth to power since 18 whatever. I'm like, speaking truth to power, if you mean speaking like, yes, sir, Mr. LAPD. I was like, the nerve. I mean, that asshole, right, is still at the LA Times.
Wow.
He should be in prison.
Well, Max Boot is still at WAPO. I mean, right? So,
he used to be at the Wall. I met him. He used to be a minor editor at the Washington Post. I mean, at the Wall Street Journal. I did illustrations for them back then, and he was my editor.
I mean,
he was a nice guy, actually.
His wife is like what, a Korean or Chinese spy?
His politics are evil.
Oh, sure, of course, but whatever. That's why I don't, I while I'm at the outrage phase, I don't know if I'm totally injured by it. But
it helps to be stoic if you can. It the old principles of classic stoicism, which is basically the serenity prayer, right? I mean, there's nothing you can.
I don't think I'm serene.
There's nothing you can do. Right? Like you have to accept things that the way they are. You can't change it. It'll change if and when it changes, or it won't. But you just have to live your life. That's it.
That's my moral outrage.
The truth is, the best analogous for life is really like whitewater rafting. You just try to avoid rocks and get down the stream without getting killed. That's it.
It's gonna be bumpy. Yeah, you just hang on. It's a wild ride. Okay, I get that. Try not to get your head bashed in on a rock.
Right.
That's good. So that's kind of how I live it and how I continue to be in it. For how long? I don't know, because I guess we haven't sold out yet, but how long before we have to? I don't know. That I don't know yet.
The thing. I don't know if, and I guess, and I've people will always think I'm being facetious when I say this, but please believe me when I'm really not. I've always kind of admired people who can sell out. I mean, I don't know how. I kind of don't know how.
Right, I don't either.
It's not like I don't anybody, get it. And nobody's offered. Nobody's ever said like, "Oh, Ted, would you come and work for us, and we'll pay you a lot of money, but you have to like, promulgate lies." I mean that hasn't happened. I guess it did.
What you mean.
The closest it came is
admirable.
I did get, I almost got interviewed by MSNBC for a TV job, and they told my agent called and said, "Oh, you have to agree never to criticize the Democratic Party." And I said, "Well, I don't even know how you could be a pundit in the United States."
That's why Ed Schultz left.
Right. I don't know how you could be a pundit in the U.S. and not criticize one of the two major parties. I mean, I don't know how you could.
That is precisely why Ed Schultz left MSNBC, because he felt morally injured because the network, and I don't know if Ed, before he passed, articulated this exactly on air. He might have alluded to it because he was still under the shitty contract that was lasting forever, and they were still paying him out on his contract, so he probably couldn't really say it. But like, Ed, please forgive me if he's never admitted to it before he passed away in July of 2018. But I'm going to out the story. Is that he was still under contract even when he came to RT. They allowed him. Part of the negotiation was they were going to pay out what they owed him, that he can get another job. But he also couldn't really tell the full scope around why
what
he
had happened.
abruptly left, and how they moved. They kept kicking his time slot, even though he was kicking everybody's ass. They kicked his time slot till the middle of nowhere night,
Yeah, I remember that.
And they brought up Rachel Maddow and all these people, and it was because Ed refused to not criticize Hillary Clinton.
Right. I remember.
That was the problem. That was exactly why they fell apart, and the network fired him.
I hate gag orders. When I was the LA Times, they offered to settle, and they offered to settle big bucks. Neither me or my son or my cat or their kids or kittens would ever have had to work again, right? For sure. But it required a complete gag order.
Oh.
Not only was I never going to be able to talk about the case the rest of my life, they were going to leave the libelous articles that they wrote about me on the internet. And I couldn't abide that.
You
and I
couldn't
was
live
like,
with that.
no, my mom was still alive. I felt like, honor's a thing, I mean, you have to be.
What? What is that word?
If you lose honestly, it's like, it's something that, like in Asia, they talk about a lot, but honor is not something Americans talk about much. And it was just like, well, I'm a journalist. It's my good name. It might not matter if I was, in some other line of work, but I mean, what do you have if if you're a journalist, you can't like admit to being a fabulist when you weren't, or let people say that you were. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's just a lack of that, especially in our industry now. And I feel like the more you look into this being now a thing, moral injury being a thing in the DSM-5, I think so many people should seek help for it. But then I worry about the ass clowns who are going to exploit it, Ted, because of all the snowflakes that are like, oh, what happened to George Floyd is so, like injurious to me. And I believe Black people should. Well,
if you're one of the cops who was standing by while in the Minneapolis, your partner in the Minneapolis PD was choking the life out of George Floyd, I would say.
No, I'm talking
that
about
might be a fair example of moral injury.
I'm talking about one of these, protesters in Seattle or whatever, white upper middle class protesters that are going to claim, that are now going to flood, since the DSM-5 makes it official, are going to flood shrinks offices and be like,
look, I think skepticism is always in order. And let's not forget, one of the earlier versions of the DSM used to officially categorize homosexuality as a psychological illness, right? So a mental illness. So obviously, or a disorder, I forget which it was. But anyway, the point is, obviously, these things are subjective and they do change. And
when I was in college,
psychiatry is only 120 years old anyway. It's new, right?
When I was in college in the early 2000s, I took a class called Deviant Psychology.
Ooh, that's cool.
And it covered everything from, like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, so psycho killers, psycho serial killers like him, which they also covered like gender dysphoria that was considered at that time. And we're talking 22 years ago.
I think that's a mental illness too, still.
Gender dysphoria was amongst the deviant psychology course. And, and now I looking back, all of this stuff has now become more and more normalized. And like, I don't know how that exactly ties into moral injury, but it's the changing parameters of what we consider mental health. And are any of those things actually permanent and concrete? Like, is there in this field, Ted, do you think any of this stuff should be like written in stone, like the law of gravity, or is this more like Murphy's law? Like,
I think, I think it depends, right? I mean, I think we can say schizophrenia is probably safely ensconced in the DSM for the foreseeable future. But things like this, it's kind of like, see if it sticks, see if it takes, see if it sticks. Like a lot of it is about social conditioning. I mean,
it's in vogue.
No, that's true. Yeah. I mean, it's and there is a tendency to pathologize things that, may just be annoyances. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just thought this was really worth bringing up because, it is something we've all experienced, and now it's in an official psychological condition.
Becoming official. Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent topic to bring up for a weird Friday conversation. I think more people should probably look into that and see if, that reassess their lives and how they've experienced this. And I wouldn't say while you're washing your hands, imagine how you can help your fellow mankind by asking them simply.
And what's interesting is it's about your standards, right? I mean, it's not about like societal standards. I mean, I've done lots of things that other people would say are immoral, but I don't think they're immoral, right? And so it's like, so this is about what you think.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting topic, and I'm glad we had a chance to explore it. So we'll just end it there. I will be back myself on at 2 p.m. today for my weekly Friday wrap up. Do you guys have a DMZ coming up?
I haven't talked to Scott yet, but we're probably going to do a DMZ tomorrow or Sunday. So watch the socials for that. You can follow me on Twitter at just Ted Rall, or that's probably the best place.
Yeah, I'll be back on my Rumble channel, Manila Chan Reports, at 2 p.m. Eastern time for my weekly Friday wrap. I also just recently published on slantedonline.com my article about protein powders, of all things, contaminated by lead.
Yeah, I've always thought they were sketchy. And
no one else is reporting it. I don't know why.
Yeah. Lead never hurt anyone.
Protein.
Little lead never caused any health problems.
Just Brian had this argument with me about the title of my article.
Which was?
I called it "Don't Lick the Walls, Don't Drink the Shake."
And what was his objection to? What was Brian's objection?
He said,
to
"This is stupid." My husband. He said, "This is stupid. Why did you name it that?" And I was like, "Did you read my article? If you read it, you would understand why." Because I actually referenced being a kid of the 80s, and we used to joke around. And, if your friend did something stupid, you used to joke and go, like, "Oh, don't mind him. His parents let him lick the walls as a kid."
I remember that.
That's a joke. I mean, So it makes, that's why the article is called "Don't Lick the Walls, Don't Drink the Shake."
Yeah.
Makes sense, no?
It totally makes sense. I like the title.
Thank you.
Brian's awesome, but he's wrong about this.
Thank you, Ted. I'm going to show him this last comment right there. Professional, big writer, Ted Rall agrees. Don't lick the walls, don't drink the shake.
Great title.
Clever headline.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you guys can go check that out too. So we'll be back Monday morning. I will have 50% chance I'm going to CPAC tomorrow again. I don't know how much I can stand it, Ted.
Well, bring your camera and see if you can get some interviews.
No,
Maybe
but the problem is
the
people. The problem was, at least yesterday. So remember, I told you guys before that I have crept up on like Gordon Chang and Sebastian Gorka and whatever, because I found the hallway that leads them into the backstage. So the speakers would come back and forth. They got smart and secured that.
Oh.
You don't have access to lurk there anymore.
But there still must be attendees who are.
No, they didn't come out to Media Row. And the press area, to go in and watch.
Sandbag them in the ladies' room.
So the wrong conference for me to sandbag the mostly men who were speaking. The press area inside the conference was way in the back with no more green area like I caught Bolton while I was stirring the coffee. None of that exists anymore. They cut out our free coffee station. We're pushed all the way in the back with no sideway
it's pointless then.
connector
It's
to the stage.
Like, why bother?
We used to have like a little small like walkway area where so here's the stage, and imagine like along the wall, right, a little strip that you can walk to go get coffee in the green area. And that's where the press area was, like directly behind that. This time the press is all the way buried in the back, all the way buried with zero little outlet anymore.
Yeah.
And then they didn't allow us to do in and outs. So you can't, even though we're in the back, you're not allowed to do in and outs when the speakers are talking. So you can't come out to your team, if theoretically, if you have one, you can't come out to the team to be like, here's the latest soundbite. So what the fuck is the point?
Yeah,
if I'm the reporter taking notes inside, right, and I can't come back outside to pass it to, let's say, if I'm a radio reporter. This is what the political
conventions have become like too. You don't have free movement around the floor. You can't talk to everybody. It used to be like they had a great. They used to have a great room for refreshments and even food, and then all the Pauls would come in there. You could hang out. You'd hang out and talk, and
nope. That's all gone from CPAC, at least this year. And none of the guests. I bumped into Richard Grinnell in the lobby. Rick Grinnell was going to speak there, I guess, former ambassador, whatever he is now. He just brought back the Venezuelan, I don't know, hostages, detainee, I don't know, whatever. He's the special envoy, I guess. Very tall. He's about as tall as you, Ted. He's a big guy. I didn't know he was that big. But anyway, none of the people that spoke came out to Media Row to do press gaggles. Like none of them. Zero. Yeah. All I got was Kucinich and Elizabeth Kucinich, the Kuciniches. They were the highlight of my event. So maybe
and they're not even conservatives.
No, they were just there to view what was going on, and they were just in and out. Hear JD Vance, and they left. And they, they spent some 15 minutes talking to me, hanging out with me, and that was about it.
Nice.
And some of it was lamenting the death of Ed Schultz.
Yeah. I sat at a table at the we should go, but I sat at a table at a cartooning convention with those two once.
Oh,
we were all like, how did he get her?
Oh,
well, I mean, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Oh, Ted.
You know.
She is a pretty lady. She's a very pretty lady, his wife.
And a very tall lady.
Very tall,
and
very pretty.
He's not.
And very smart, but he is lovely and wonderful. But so he was the highlight. So all right, we'll be back on Monday. See you guys at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll see you guys at 2 p.m. on Manila Chan reports here on Rumble only. So that does it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great weekend, guys.
Great weekend.
Adios.
Thank you. Bye. See you Monday.